Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to this Council Cabinet meeting on Wednesday the 10th of November 2021. Let's start with the agenda. Any apologies, please? No apologies received. Item 2 is late items, of which I believe there are none. Item 3 is reports and petitions, and again, I don't believe there are any. Okay. Item 4, identification of urgent items to which call-in will not apply, and there are none of those either. Okay. Declarations of interest, please. No, if there are oh, sorry. Yes, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to say, in relation to the item on the expansion of Landau Forte College, my wife is an employee of the college and my daughter attends the school.
Duly noted, thank you. Any others? No. In that case, item 6, the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of October. Can I have a proposer? Councillor Barker. Seconder. Councillor Pearce, thank you. Okay, so item 7, recommendations from Executive Scrutiny Board. Again, there are some which resulted from the meeting last night, which, as is custom and practice, we'll deal with them, each individual recommendation at the item whilst we're discussing it. That's okay. So moving on to item 8, the minute extract from Council, from full Council, and that's a motion regarding the access to Rainsway Household Waste Recycling Centre. Is that going to be you, Rachel?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So this report is a response to the Council motion from September of this year around the Rainsway Household Waste Recycling Centre and the access to it. It's an update on the operating model that is in booking system that is in place at Rainsway and the budgetary implications of any changes in this system as suggested in the motion to Council. The booking system was introduced during the pandemic and has since been refined, but basically allows Derby and Derbyshire residents to book slots to obviously dispose of waste in the recycling centre, up to 12 slots per year, and to do that online. However, there is access, if there is no IT, to do that through Derby Direct and a phone call. And also there are special circumstances if residents really need to dispose of more than 12 items or 12 slots during the year, and our waste officers will support those individual cases. This booking system has provided a range of benefits to the city. It has stopped the illegal use of trade waste being taken to the recycling centre and out of area, people using it out of the Derby-Derbyshire area, and obviously the illegal use of that trade waste disposal and the subsequent cost of that disposal to council taxpayers of Derby City. It allows for the demand to be made to be more effectively monitored, and then the opening hours and operation model tweaked in support of residents' needs. It's reduced traffic issues with previous queuing at the site and reducing, I think, frustration for residents using the site and also local businesses. It supports the council's overall budgetary position of making $575,000 a year in savings on disposal costs of some of the waste previously taken there, which again would have been outside the licence conditions of the operation at Rainsway, and has discouraged the no-show bookings, people booking availability and not using that, therefore making the availability more effective. And has provided really good data for officers to allow dynamic review of that booking system as and when need demands. So the system has bedded down over that period of time during the pandemic, and additional availability has been made available, particularly from June of this year, highlighted in 4.13 of the report. And we have seen at that stage actually capacity being created from that time on. Concerns were raised by members at the council in the motion around fly tipping and the implication of additional fly tipping caused by reducing access, if you like, to Rainsway. National research into fly tipping has demonstrated that most of fly tipping that is seen at a national level is non-household waste, i.e. that from the building trade, which is not accepted and have not got a licence at the recycling centre to take that waste. It is therefore illegal. There's not a clear link between that and access to household recycling centres. I would say, for members' comfort, the council is energising its approach to addressing fly tipping, using both strong enforcement and targeted support to key areas in the city where the problem is more prevalent. However, overall, officers recommend that we maintain the current booking system at Rainsway, but also recognise the ongoing review of the data and experience for residents and customers is an ongoing process to allow for further refinement of the system as necessary. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce, your portfolio. Anything you want to add in response to that?
There's just one or two things that can I refer to the scrutiny committee from last night, Chair? Is that okay?
Well, it was in relation to the opening gambit. If you
the opening gambit, no, nothing at all on that one.
Councillor Repton in with the 2 recommendations from last night. So then, if you could deal with the 3 points in the motion, i.e. reinstating access to the site, opening at pre-pandemic opening hours, removal of the requirement to having access to recycling only through online pre-booked slots. Well, that's not the case anyway, is it? I think people can access it anyway. And then removing the limit of slots available for domestic households per year. If you can address them when we've heard from Councillor Repton. And then there's 2 recommendations from last night. Councillor Repton.
Thank you, Chair. I think the feeling last night was that we should be targeting trade and trade waste, not ordinary members of the public who seem to be badly affected by these £500,000 cuts in the Rainsway Household Waste Centre recycling. You see above the recommendations what the 3 requirements are. That's reinstating access to the site to at least pre-pandemic opening hours, removing the requirement to have access to recycling only through online pre-booked slots, and removing the limit of slots available for domestic households per year. That way, I think we'll remove the actual problems that many of the public are currently experiencing. And that leads to the 2 recommendations. That's agreed that the data, the information in the Council Cabinet report is not sufficient for the recommendations that have been put forward, and resolved to recommend to Council Cabinet that we need to maximise accessibility, online bookings and household waste recycling. Along the lines that I mentioned, target waste abuse, but not ordinary members of the public. And then secondly, resolve to recommend to Council Cabinet that in recognition of our need for action on the climate emergency and for reasons of equality of access for those without cars, that officers look to how to open access to the Rainsway Household Waste Recycling Centre to allow people to bring items on foot and by cycle, including cycle trailers. We really did feel that there's a need for that, and hopefully the Cabinet will move in a positive way to address those issues. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so Councillor Pearce, then the recommendations from last night, are you satisfied that you've got sufficient data, and are we taking steps to allow walk-ons and cycles?
The data that's been put forward by the officers, I think it's more than enough data. I know Councillor Linda said there was anecdotal evidence. The anecdotal evidence is the people that's actually been to the tip, which I think is a vastly improved system. The data that we've got, he did say that it was only like 3 months worth of data. If we want to carry out a 12-month data, would the scrutiny board be happy with that, that we look at the system in another 9 months when we've got a full year's data? And then on to the points that Councillor Kerr rose regarding the access for pedestrians and bikes. The pedestrians, I cannot see how a pedestrian can take an amount of waste that they can't get into their own recycling bins at home or their own residual bin without having to go down to the recycling centre. As to the bikes, I think the use of cargo bikes has been looked at from the officer's point of view. I raised that point a couple of months ago, and we're still looking at the safety aspects of getting into the tip with those cargo bikes.
So briefly on the recommendations 1 to 3 in the motion from full council, reinstating access to pre-pandemic opening hours.
The the pre-COVID hours, it's all been looked at. That's all in the data that's come through on the council's report from the officers till last night in the scrutiny committee. There's no way we could open it as fully as that because we can't.
So, what the answer there is constantly under review.
It is under review. The points in the data that was produced, it's showing that there's certain days that never got used before COVID, and so they're looking at probably increasing the hours on certain days. So let's say it's a Thursday or a Friday, Councillor Shanker. I know you're nodding now, so you do agree with me. But there's some days that the tip wasn't used at all. So what's the point in opening it to that day when there's 8 hours or 6 to 8 hours when nothing's being done there, when we could put those extra hours onto Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sundays? It would be the total amount of hours in the week, but it would be on different days.
And we're still at 24 to 48 hours to be able to book an appointment.
If you look on your system now, you'll be able to book a tip run tomorrow, yes.
So item 2 then, access regarding the requirement of having to access recycling only through online. That's not the case. It can be booked by telephone.
Online and booked on telephone.
Okay, and then removing the slots available to domestic households per year. Has anybody reached 12 visits per year?
I think of the 9,500 people that had booked slots, there was 9 people that had booked the 12 slots in that period of time.
And you'd want the opportunity to understand why they need more than 12, but deal with them appropriately if they
deal with them appropriate. Again, as Rachel said earlier, if people have got up to their 12 slot limit, and if they want to ring the council up or ring the tip up, I'm sure we can compromise with them and get them a couple of extra tips. It's not as though we're going to be draconian on this. We're not going to say, right, you've reached your 12 and you're not allowed to have any more. If they want 2 more, if they've reached the 11th month and they've got 2 more slots to book, I'm sure we can look at that.
So it's effectively a guideline.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Any questions? Yes. Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Councillor Bolter. Well done on feeding Councillor Pearce's lines. That was well done. I just wanted to talk about some of the information that's come from our council officers. First of all, we were talking about commercial waste. How do we know that we've stopped commercial waste going into the site? Because if we know that we've stopped commercial waste going into the site, why didn't we stop it in the first place? I'm trying to understand how we can get that data. I mean, all that we actually really know is that the amount of waste going into the Rainsway site has reduced. That's the only thing we actually know. And whilst I would like people with commercial waste to pay for their waste, there is still the occurrence of people tipping, fly tipping their waste. Now, one of the things that wasn't mentioned in this report is how much fly tipping we have in the city. However, moreover, the fly tipping that occurs tends to be outside the city because it's more rural. There are more nooks and crannies, trees and forests that people can actually go and tip their waste rather than in the city itself. So all we're doing as a local authority is passing the fly tipping on to other local authorities. The other thing is I've spoken to groups of people that are complaining. Those that use the system do like the system, but those that can't get on with the system find it very, very difficult. And at the end of the day, we're here to serve all of the people of the city, not just a proportion of people, a percentage. And that group tell me that what they do is they go up to the outside of the city waste disposal, such as Ilkeston or those in South Derbyshire. Now, surely that's not what we're doing. Where does that fit in with our green agenda? We're telling people to go and travel further. So I would ask people, I would ask the cabinet to look at that and think, well, there are some anomalies here, and I think if you opened it as the original motion suggested, you would be doing the city a far better service. Finally, Councillor Polter, I would like to raise the issue of democracy. This council brought a motion, and the majority vote said that we should open the Rainsway tip. Now, are you saying as a minority group on this city council, but running the cabinet, that you are going to overrule the majority of councillors on this city? If so, then we're running the wrong governance system in this city, and we should go to a committee system where all councillors' votes count.
You've heard, and we've taken account of the officers' views on this, and you've had responses in relation to the items that's been raised. I just wonder, you didn't mention, have you consulted the businesses in your ward and asked them if they would like the queues back and all the disruption to their business by changing the system back to where we were before?
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise I was a member of the cabinet. Are you asking me the question now?
Yes.
Okay, well,
Have you
no, I haven't.
consulted with your local
actually.
businesses?
No, I
See if they-
haven't.
No, okay. Rachel, did you want to answer any of those points, particularly around fly tipping, perhaps?
Yes, I mean, the 2 points I was going to answer on the commercial waste and how do we know. I mean, clearly, some of that information is assumed on the basis of the initial, when we opened the booking system up, we were getting people trying to book, 76 bookings in 18 months. That gave an impression of clearly not a residential use. We also have the evidence we had prior to the booking system, who would turn up with clearly trade waste, and it's very difficult for operatives at the site to stop that happening and to deal with that confrontation there and then, and that has reduced that impact. So that's one way we understand how it would work. And also there's national evidence which shows that a booking system does discourage those people who are trying to do that trade waste disposal from using those facilities. Around fly tipping and the issue around other authorities, I mean, clearly the City Council works very closely with our neighbouring district councils and the county, and clearly the access availability of those 12 is for Derbyshire and Derby residents, not just the city, and we are regularly working with our local authorities in partnership to try and reduce the level of fly tipping and to be much more effective in our enforcement activities across the borders to deal with those issues in those places and to target where it's happening rather than just generally. And the issue raised about the access, I mean, clearly a phone call to Derby Direct very simply can book a slot at any time.
Thank you. Councillor Skelton.
Thank you, Chair. Just raising the thing, I think, going on from what Councillor Kerr was saying last night about the need for people with bicycles or arriving on foot even. Sometimes people do have smaller items that they need to dispose of. One in particular would be light bulbs. You're not supposed to put those, or batteries, certainly with light bulbs, you're not supposed to put those into your black bin. Can't put them into your blue bin, you have to take them down to Rainsway. Now, you can have a box on the back of your, strapped onto the rack on the back of your bike with some light bulbs in. So I don't see that in that sort of scenario there is any problem with actually turning up to Rainsway like that.
Well, I think Councillor Pearce has covered that adequately. Yes, Councillor Shanker even. Questions?
Thank you, Chair. I think, once again, the provision of a waste recycling centre, a tip, is a fundamental and important issue, one of basic service delivery for any decent council to want to provide and want to provide well. And yet we're left wanting because, as we've seen earlier today, having to tell your cabinet member what to say. We just unfortunately got an administration which just isn't up to the job.
Councillor Shanker, can I just ask, it's fine reading a pre-prepared speech on the matter.
I've not got a speech, I've got some notes here.
You're reading from it. Can I just point out, we have quite a long agenda
Absolutely.
today. So
and if you let me carry on,
I'd appreciate
we'll be quicker.
I'm just trying to say, I'd appreciate it if you get to the point.
Thank you. I've got to agree with Councillor Graves. This was the will of full council, and as a minority administration, I think it's not the system that's broken, it's the people operating the system. If you ignore the will of full council, you give ammunition to the likes of Councillor Graves to say the system's broken, but it's the individuals operating that system. Whilst your administration has been plagued with internal divisions, it's obvious to me.
Councillor Schenker,
It's
sorry.
obvious to me,
I've already warned you that I need you to stick to the point.
I am, having made a commitment.
Then all these other side comments are unnecessary and wasting time.
But they're absolutely
I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll answer the first part of it for you. This council operates a strong leader and cabinet model. It's the democratic process of this council, and this meeting today is part of that, and it's your opportunity to try and persuade cabinet to deal with your views and take your views on these matters, which we're doing.
Right.
That answers your first point that I've heard. Have you got anything else you want to say?
So let me try persuading cabinet then. So you'll recall, as the leader of your group, you made a commitment to open a second refuse tip in Derby. And in the years you've been in power, let alone open a second tip as you promised to do, what you've actually done is brought in massive cuts to the one tip that has served the city of Derby and served the city of Derby well for absolutely decades. And there's absolutely, don't look shell-shocked, this is factual information. You made that commitment and now you've reduced the service there. To restore the service back to pre-pandemic levels wouldn't have been a huge challenge. It can be done. And let me just refer to the survey that Councillor Pearce mentioned. Those people using the service do like it, but it's a fraction of the people who are using the service now compared to who was using it before. Those people who have been unable to use the service for one reason or another weren't even allowed to take part in that consultation. So obvious the results were going to look good because only those people who could use it, the fraction of people who could use the service, were allowed to take part in the consultation. And I'll share some figures with you, some data which we only received after weeks and weeks of asking in the last couple of days. And this is quite pertinent, and for me it should be in the report, but Councillor Pearce is hopefully aware of these figures and he may be able to offer some explanation. Visits down, and let me just quantify the period I looked at. So I looked at 6 months prior to the pandemic. So prior to February 20, I looked at 6 months of data of visits and tonnage at the site, and then I've looked at the last 6 months. So whilst the tweaks and changes and all the new system was bedded in, so probably the best 6 months in terms of visits. And the figures are quite stark. Visits are down 53%. That's from over 128,000 visits to down to 67,000. Waste tonnage figures are down 46%. That's from 8,160 tonnes to 3,750 tonnes. That's a massive reduction both in the usage and the tonnage. And what that's done, you might think it's quite smart and we've saved £575,000 to plug a hole in the budget somewhere else. But again, from the figures provided to us by officers, if you work out the average cost it now costs to dispose a tonne of waste at Rainsway, it's gone from £92 a tonne to £125 a tonne. That's a 36% increase in the cost to dispose a tonne of waste at the tip. It can't be right. So all we're asking is let's look at these, let's do the right thing for Derby. We know the second tip is out of the question, but let's get this one tip we've got in the city working again properly so it serves as many people in the city as it can, rather than absolutely restricting the use of a basic and fundamental service that this council should be providing.
Thank you. Rachel, any comment on those numbers, particularly in terms of cost of recycling or waste per tonne?
And I think we would need to see those figures in the context of the whole, because clearly over the last 2 years we have seen an increase in residual waste tonnages at the curbside because we've had more working from home and therefore more waste going into the black bins in that sense. So the whole picture would include the figures that Councillor Schenker has just mentioned. But I would say that part of that reduction would largely be down to the reduction of illegal trade waste use going into that tip. That's part of that rationale. But I mean, to comment on the overall cost, I would need to do that properly outside of this meeting and provide that in writing, Leader, rather than try and do that in that context.
Okay, so your recommendations are made in the knowledge in relation to the way the statistics and the numbers have been affected.
I think just, sorry, to just further on with that, the conversation about having a 12-month review of the TIP, I made it clear in my introduction that having this regular data and information and continue reviewing it is part of the ongoing process of the new booking system. And so a 12-month review for the 9 months will be a reasonable thing for us to do, to come back and consider those options at that point.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? So just for clarity then, in relation to the exec scrutiny recommendations, we can't agree the first one because we believe that we have sufficient data to make informed decisions around this particular issue. And in relation to the second one, the overall conclusion is that it's unnecessary to facilitate walk-ons. What we wouldn't want is people parking on your industrial estate friends there and walking across the road and handing it over to somebody or anything like that. In terms of batteries, I can take mine to any supermarket to get rid of them without any issue, places I go on a weekly basis. And the rest of it is just the impracticalities of allowing people to walk on to a busy waste collection centre. So we can't accept that recommendation either. Is that your view, Cabinet? Okay, thank you. And we'll move on to item 9, a minute extract from the Children and Young People's Board. Who's can deal with that?
Hi,
Sorry.
thank you, Chair. I gather we'll go down one recommendation at a time, so I'll start with the first one. The first one being special needs provision. The first recommendation is regarding naming schools that don't exist, a suitable provision to meet the special educational needs of Derby City children. The Cabinet member attended this meeting and agreed she wasn't happy with it and agreed to change policy. Let's use this opportunity today to all agree that policy is going to change and put this into written procedure. Thank you, Chair.
So, Andy or Yvonne? Yvonne.
Yeah, thank you. Andy Smith and I did attend a scrutiny committee, and as we explicitly outlined to the Chair, changes have already been made to the practice in the HCP team, to the effect that a school would not be named in draft HCPs that have not yet opened. And whilst I absolutely agree that this is not good practice, and I would like Cabinet to be clear that naming a school that has not yet opened in a draft HCP is not and was not, in fact, against the law, and that precedent has been set in other local authorities. So as far as I'm concerned, and as I reiterated to the Chair and to CYP scrutiny on the 9th, changes have already been made prior to the scrutiny discussion, and there is nothing more for the Cabinet to do and to take up on this matter. It's already been done.
Okay. Any further comments, questions?
Yes, sorry, can I just speak again? Sorry. The Cabinet member did agree the first recommendation. It is on the Council's broadcast, so I'm very disappointed that that is the view, and I would like to know what has changed, please.
Nothing's changed. I agreed the recommendation because it had already been done. I can't be more explicit. It's been done already. Processes, procedures have been changed already. The team have all been trained. It's been done. So if I now say again, okay, we'll do that again, I'm just saying what I've already said. It's been done.
So I take it from that you consider the recommendation to be superfluous to what's already been done.
If they want me to accept it, I'll accept it. But like I said, it's been done.
Okay. So in that case, we don't need to accept it. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Sorry, Councillor Skelton.
So are we saying actually the policy has been changed and the procedure has been changed and that is written down? Can I have that clarification, please?
Yvonne?
For the third time of asking, yes.
Okay. All right, then we'll move on.
Thank you. Can I move on to the next recommendation, please, Chair? The next recommendation regarding the half-term activity and food programme. The Council hasn't done a full equality and impact assessment for the holiday activity and food programme or for the summer promise that was made. It is Council policy that this is done and serves to improve the offer locally and ensure the Council is acting inclusively. The Board therefore requests Cabinet to ensure that a full equality and impact assessment is completed before any further programme commences for all aspects of the HAF programme, including food vouchers. Thank you.
I might take this one again, Chair.
Thank you.
Derby's HAF programme, which locally combined two funding streams, mainly the HAF and the COVID Winter Grant Extension, was a huge success, and one where Derby received a visit from and subsequent very positive feedback from the Department for Education. Indeed, councillors from both not just the Conservative but also the Labour group attended some of the activities and were impressed with what was going on in our city. Cabinet will know that a huge amount of work went into developing the HAF programme, and whilst formal equality impact assessment wasn't initially completed, considerable effort went into ensuring that the programme allowed for a larger inclusive offer to incorporate free school meals and children and families from vulnerable backgrounds, which of course included children and with special educational needs and disabilities. HAF was the centre of our summer programme and provided provision for 14 of the 17 wards in Derby City via Community Action Derby, with additional coverage via our children's centres, adult education service, library services and neighbourhood partnership in Mackworth, and involved a combination of faith, community and specialist groups. And whilst Cabinet can be assured that we develop the programme to make it as inclusive as possible, I'm happy to support this recommendation from CYP Scrutiny.
Okay. Supported. Anything else? In that case, no. We'll move on. And we'll move on to...
Can I move to the next one? I've got a few more recommendations, please, Chair.
Sorry. It's the layout of the... I'm not picking up on the...
I've got a few more recommendations,
They're spread
Chair.
around the paper. Go on then, Councillor Lind.
Okay. So, monitoring safeguarding practice. The Board noted the report provided, the recent good Ofsted rating and the great work currently being done by officers. However, we could not fail to overlook the significant pressures and rising demand for social care services over the last 18 months and the projected rising demands for numbers of children in care. The Board therefore resolved to recommend to Cabinet that the Leader of the Council write to the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care to highlight the pressures the Council are facing and to call for appropriate funding to meet that demand. Thank you, Chair.
Again, Chair, if it's all right with you, I can respond to that. So I am pleased that the CYP Scrutiny received a paper and presentation on the rising demands and pressures in children's social care. Cabinet will know that this is a matter dear to my heart and an area of concern not just for the Cabinet but for the whole Council. Although the recommendation states that the leaders should write to the new Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, I think the Chair probably means the new Secretary of State for Education, Nadeem Silhawi. Cabinet will be aware that the week he was appointed to his role, I wrote to him and invited him to Derby. I have received a response last week and he hopes to be able to take me up on my invitation in due course. I'm also aware that the leader, as I, have written several letters to the government about funding and ensuring a fair settlement for Derby. We also are lobbying our local MPs and we ask them to take up matters in the House with ministers. Therefore, it is in my view that no additional action is required as a result of this recommendation, as we will continually write and lobby wherever we can.
Thank you. I think it's very clear, Councillor, and we are already doing that. We will continue to write. We have the same issues as you on this, and Councillor Williams will follow them through. The next one, I think, is about member visits and...
Yes, thank you, Chair. The Board also recommends that children's homes visits are commenced immediately and that member visits now include out-of-area visits also, as we are corporate parents and we want to ensure that as councillors we are satisfied that the children are being appropriately looked after. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. So it was not possible to undertake any member visits to our children's homes during COVID, and I'm sure that the Chair of Scrutiny would understand the reasons for that. Senior leaders maintained direct contact with the homes during the pandemic through regular reports to of the Head of Service of Children's Residential. When it was sufficiently safe to do so, myself and the Strategic Director for People Services undertook a monitoring visit in May 2021 to one of the homes, and the Director of Early Help and Children's Social Care has also undertaken monitoring visits in August and September of this year. I'm working closely with the senior leaders of this service, and we will reschedule members' visits when it's appropriate and safe to do so. I note that CYP Scrutiny also recommended to Cabinet that member visits should also take place to out-of-area placements immediately. However, this is just not possible. Whilst Derby maintains corporate parenting responsibilities for children in care who are placed in external children's places home outside of the city, we are not actually able to, we don't run them ourselves, and we are therefore, as elected members, we have no jurisdiction in undertaking visits to these homes. However, I would like to assure Cabinet that there are a range of quality assurance checks undertaken by the Council, and of course all children's homes are regulated and inspected by Ofsted. So it's my first week back to work this week, Chair, and I've already been in contact with Democratic Services, and we will be arranging visits in the near future, but I will also be rearranging some training because a number of our councillors, whilst they do hold the corporate responsibility for visits, do not understand what a visit means, or indeed the things that they should or should not be saying, etc. So I will be rerunning that training as well. So I can give those assurances both to the Chair of CYP Scrutiny and to Cabinet.
You okay with that, Councillor Lind? Clearly, under previous events through COVID, we've not been able to do it, but we acknowledge under our corporate parent responsibilities that we need to get it back on track, yeah?
Okay, thank you.
And
So
the last two that I can see then are these the last two?
Yes,
on the bottom
final
of the paper?
one.
Right,
Final
okay.
one. Demanding social care and placement sufficiency. Again, due to the huge demand and pressure within this area, the board resolved to request that Cabinet member also write to the government, urging them to recognise this and fund it appropriately. I hope this is taken very seriously and given the attention it needs by Cabinet to lobby the government on this issue. It is of huge concern to the board, and I hope it will be to you too. Thank you.
I'm sure it is, and I suspect that Councillor Williams is going to tell you how many, roughly how many letters she's written on the subject, but Councillor Williams.
Chair, as I've just stated previously, I continually write to government, but I am also a peer member on the LGA, and through my LGA contacts, we are also working collectively across all parties to make sure that this message is getting home to the government about demand and sufficiency placements. This is not a problem that Derby alone suffers from, and I will continue to write, to visit where I can, to lobby, whether it's to government ministers, the LGA or MPs. I will do everything that I can do, and I have been doing this continually since becoming the Cabinet member. So at this point, again, I'm happy to write another letter, but to give the assurances to the Chair of CYP Scrutiny and to Cabinet that I am already doing this, I have done this and will continue to do it.
And just to add to that, constantly in my LGA meetings, my East Midlands Council's meetings and meetings with local MPs, this is top of the agenda, and we will continue to raise it. So any other issues on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think with the constant reshuffles in government and changing chairs, I think it's really important that we keep the pressure up and keep lobbying. Thank you.
It doesn't help, I mean, we get to hear from some new ministers how they're going to tackle these things. Yvonne?
Absolutely agree with the Chair of Scrutiny, with Councillor Lind. Every time there's been a reshuffle or change of minister, I have written to the new minister, I've lobbied them on the issues, and I've also invited them to Derby every single time to come and visit us. I'm hoping that Nadine Zawahi, in his new role, will come and visit us. Unfortunately, he's been invited in a previous role to his 2 previous roles ago, and he was unable to attend Derby 5 times, unfortunately, due to cancellations. So, again, I will be pestering him to come and see what we're doing in Derby and to lobby him.
Thank you. Okay, moving on then. Now, can we to item 10, future management of Alistar Park? Is Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't intend to say a huge amount. Obviously, I know some councillors that attended the scrutiny meeting last night will have met Jo from the Wildlife Trust. She's the Chief Exec of the Wildlife Trust. I'm delighted she's here. And she's going to be saying a few words as well, if that's okay with the Cabinet. But they're the brains behind this, and I think it's important to stress that I think this is once again a fantastic example of the city working in partnership and recognising that we don't have all the answers as a city council, all the expertise on something associated with this issue. And this is about the council and the city responding to the climate challenge, but in addition to that, also the challenge around biodiversity and the loss of biodiversity, and we all know those two issues are intrinsically linked. And obviously, at the tail end of COP26, I think there can be no better time for this council and this city to be considering a report about how we come together to respond to undoubtedly the greatest challenge facing humanity. And I'm not I really do not want to say I'm overemphasising that, because that is how I see it. So I think this is an extremely positive move by the city. It puts Derby at the forefront of the environmental challenge and begins to address significant issues about loss of habitat and loss of biodiversity and species across not just the UK but the world. And I think this is a good example of a city acting positively in a way that also engages fundamentally local people and the local people, communities, the local groups, the Friends of Alistar Park, Lord Harrington Fishing Club and others have already been involved in this process. They were part of the consultation that initially the response to Historic England about the potential closure of the golf course came forward with the proposals and ideas about returning the park to a wild state. And whilst I understand there has been some comments about this being a cost-cutting exercise, you only have to look at very small examples like what's happened in Mickleover over the summer with the introduction of pilot wild meadows at the bottom of the road there near Tesco's, which has gone down incredibly well with local residents to the point, and that was done by our own Street Pride team, by the way, where local residents have actually asked the team for how they can do that, how they can translate that in their own gardens. So I think that's incredibly positive to a scheme that Jo and her team have implemented very recently just down the road in Willington with a reintroduction of 2 pairs of wild beavers at the Willington Nature Reserve. So these things are happening at both a small and large scale, and this is an opportunity to transform our largest green space into a habitat that can be used not only by wildlife but clearly by local people to walk, to enjoy the open air and to enjoy in time hopefully woodlands, meadows, and that clearly will also have, hopefully, we saw the significant benefits that green space and open space had during the pandemic. And I'm hoping that the people of Derby will welcome this. I think there has been some very positive comments about this. But from my perspective, Chair, I think this is a great opportunity for Derby to be recognised, to have the single biggest urban rewilding project in the UK, and that is exactly the sort of thing this city should be doing to put itself on the map and to respond in the right way to the climate challenge and the loss of biodiversity. And I'll pass over to Jo now so she can say a few more words from her perspective.
Jo, welcome and thanks. Nice to see you again. Hope we're not rushing you into this, are we, or anything along the way?
Thank you. It's great to be here, and there's not much really to add to what Paul's already said. I mean, it's been really exciting to build the proposals with Rewilding Britain and with the council team. As Paul says, this would put Derby City on the map in terms of action rather than words. We've heard a lot at COP26 about targets. We've heard very little about action, and I think it's important that the city takes the lead and acts to solve the climate crisis. And Alistar Park is really well positioned to become a rewilding project, and it would be the largest rewilding project in the UK. It would be great for people, it would be great for nature, and it would be great for the carbon net zero target. So very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Clearly, what we've got here is some recommendations and some options in terms of where we go with it. For me, there's no rush into this, and this could be a fantastic scheme that can develop over time. But the key here is around cooperation and consultation with the key stakeholders, both in the park, in the city, in the county, with a view to providing a massive contribution to offsetting our carbon issues here for the city. So I absolutely welcome it. Just for the sake of clarity, in the thoughts and the processes that you've gone through so far, is there any suggestion of earth moving or archaeology in the plan so far?
Shall I pick that one up? No, there is no plans to do anything like that. If there were any plans to do anything like that, then obviously we would consider them very carefully, because the historic and archaeological park artefacts are very important to us as well as to others. So no plans, and we would be very careful about plans that did include those things.
Okay, so in a way there's your answer, Councillor Repton. We can agree because we've got no plans to do anything like that. Did you want to expand on it any further?
Yeah, I think it's important for me just to reflect some of the conversations and contributions last night, and also what members of the public have been saying to me and to other people. What they don't want is a theme park there. What they also say to me, it's a park, it's not a nature reserve. They are a bit concerned about that we make sure there's not over-commercialisation. So what people want is proper, meaningful consultation, not a fait accompli. Because if we remember back to a recent council cabinet meeting, the will of the council was that as part of those considerations, we consider the golf course, but that was ignored. So what the executive committee last night wants to make sure is that the will of the people isn't ignored. And what the will of the people is that they're properly consulted and their concerns are taken seriously, that it doesn't become a theme park. It doesn't become over-commercialised. There isn't just a series of footpaths. We have thousands of miles of footpaths up and down this county. So proper, meaningful consultation, not a theme park, not over-commercialisation.
Which is exactly what the recommendations represent and suggest. Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions, comments? Councillor Skelton, your party and your group, your national party, must be really excited about the prospect of the biggest rewilding project in the city, in the country.
Chair, just I'd like to obviously have a few questions to Joe. I'm just interested really as to how this sort of came off the drawing board. Whose idea was it in the first place?
Well, we've been looking at various possibilities across the county for rewilding for some years, and we've worked closely with Rewilding Britain for the last 3 years, and we've already run 2 big rewilding projects with them. And the idea came in a meeting with Paul, where we were discussing various options for Derby, and we both agreed that this would be a really exciting thing to explore, and we've done that since then quite quickly, so it came from that, really.
So that was just, what, a couple of months ago type of thing?
Well, the conversation with Paul was a couple of months ago, yeah.
Thanks. This is obviously a very interesting and large project, which rightly, has got a lot of people interested and quite excited. Obviously, as you've just said, it's been quite a short lifespan that it's had so far. One particular thing when I read the report that sort of struck me was that there isn't really any or hasn't been at all developed, the whole concept of really getting and reaping public health benefits from this. I also note, obviously, that Alistar is the one area of the city that has the highest life expectancy and one of the least deprived areas. The areas of the city that are really in need of public health interventions are the areas, unfortunately, that at the moment don't often have that much public open space. Or what they do is not sort of on the same level as say, an area like Alistar, which has ample public open space. So I was wondering whether there is any, and certainly I hope in the consultation that this might be sort of allowed to be fleshed out more, whether there's scope for this sort of thing to be done across other parts of the city, particularly targeting the areas where there is, there needs to be some real gains made in public health. Obviously, I know you're not sort of experts in public health, but would you, talk to the public health team in the council here and just start to develop that more? It talks about in one of the recommendations co-creation. So I'd be very happy if that that went ahead. But that sort of brings me back to why Alistar was chosen when, for public health reasons, you would have gone somewhere else to get the biggest benefits. So I don't know whether that really, we almost need to take like one step back and think, actually, what are we trying to achieve? Obviously, we want to, improve biodiversity, and all the other ecological things that we want to do and help with climate change. But we also, and it would be really good to get some really good public health outcomes as well, particularly for the people in the most deprived areas of the city. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. You kind of answered your own question there when you said that the report talks about co-creation, and that's exactly what is planned here. It's full consultation, co-creation, taking in all matters, and the aim of this is to provide a facility that would attract people from all over the city to come and make use of the facilities.
Yeah, the problem is,
Paul
Chair, that people who perhaps, say, live in Sinfin are not going to get 2 buses and the cost of that to go over to Alistar. They're more likely to use the parks in Sinfin.
Probably why they didn't play golf at Alistar and they played at Sinfin. I appreciate that.
Perhaps I could just intervene and say that as well as running the Alistar Park consultation process, we're also one of the 7 test sites, the DEFRA social prescribing test sites. So we're working closely with DEFRA at a national level to look at green social prescribing, and that's all across Derby and all across Derbyshire. And we work really closely with the public health team and with the NHS on that programme. So I completely agree. We want to do more of this all across the city, and we have plans to do that, and we're already doing that. I think why Alistar is, there's an opportunity there because of the change that's been made by the golf course closing, and so that's a logical place to start and to test this, but it doesn't mean it's the only place we're going to do it, and we would like to do it all over the city and all over the county.
So I guess your comments are noted, Councillor Skelton. Come on down, talk to Joe, come to us. Let's work together to green the city. Anybody else? Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Councillor Poulter. I think, unfortunately, the issue of rewilding wasn't on the agenda initially when the golf course became an issue. Cabinet members should really take care in why they're deciding this, especially as it isn't really clear why you have gone down this path. Councillor Poulter, in your own words just now, said there are no plans so far being the operative words. I don't believe there are no ulterior motives to this site. I believe this is a smokescreen. Again, you've decided to go against the majority decision on the council. Councillor Poulter, you mentioned about persuading the cabinet. Equally, when this was raised in full council, your group had the opportunity to persuade all the other councillors. Democracy has died on this council. It died under Labour, and now it's died under the Conservatives.
Thank you. Conspiracy theory noted. Councillor Shanker, did your group want to support this, or are you just going to stick with the golfers?
I've got no comments to make on the report, if that's what you're asking, Councillor Bolter.
Can they be agreed, Cabinet? Oh, sorry, Paul, did you want to come back in? Sorry, before we take the vote, Paul, I think wanted to come back in.
Yeah, just if I may, Chair, I guess just responding to the point that Councillor Skelton made in terms of speed, I guess from my own perspective, we've moved quickly on this for the very obvious reason of the need to respond to a climate emergency. Therefore, I think we all recognise how important that is. And indeed, as the report specifies, the people of Alistar actually asked about this as a possibility. And yes, in the discussion I had with Joe, I met Joe back in the summer, and we had a conversation, and it went from there. And we have spoken to the experts, as we should, on a matter as important as this, in terms of Joe's expertise in her organisation, and Rewilding Britain themselves, who are the notified experts. And they have said lots and lots, they are talking to other local authorities about this possibility, but this is the first local authority to take the step of actually doing something and taking action, which I think is something that we should do, given the severity of the climate challenge. The other thing I would say is, in terms of consultation, we take that incredibly seriously. We actually briefed in confidence the Friends group prior to the announcement being made, so they weren't caught unawares, because they are absolutely front and centre to the plans around this. This is a genuine opportunity to consult with the people of Derby. There will be opportunities, obviously, in terms of transport links and all those other things to enable people to access the park. So that will be all part of the consultation in terms of how we do that. And the other thing I wanted to be very clear about is the Wildlife Trust, given you can tell how serious they are about this project. They have done that report, they produced that report at their own cost. No cost to this council at all. They have produced that report at their own cost, at their own risk, because clearly there was a risk that the report, I don't know whether it is going to get accepted, but I hope it does. But they have done that at their own cost, their own risk. So the council has not paid anybody for the commissioning of this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. So with that summary by the Chief Exec, Cabinet, are any comments, or can we agreed? Recommendations 2.1 to 2.3. Agreed? Okay, thank you. Joe, thanks ever so much again for giving up another afternoon. Thank you for coming, and we'll no doubt see you soon and crack on with this. All right, thank you. Good. Moving on then to item 11, and the Strategic School Place Planning, Landau 40 College Expansion Proposal. Andy? Oh, sorry, Gumau.
Thank you, Chair. I'll pick that up now. In terms of this report, it sets out a proposal for additional secondary school places, and that relates to the council's duty to ensure there are sufficient secondary school places following growth in primary pupil numbers over recent years. The council has been working very closely with the trust in relation to this proposal, which is for an additional 520 places at Landau Forte over a gradual basis, with 104 additional pupils coming through in Year 7 over the years. The details are outlined within the report. 1.6 outlines that this project is at a cost of just under £12 million, with some joint funding from the trust for £500,000. 1.6 in the report sets out the details of this scheme in terms of additional space on the existing school site and building work, purchasing additional land and buildings, and that's outlined in a separate Part 2 confidential report, Chair. And also, equally importantly, the proposal is to create an additional 15 special needs enhanced resource places for children with autism and emotional mental health needs as well, Chair. The main body of the report sets out pupil projections and growth in terms of numbers for secondary, and also outlines additional information in relation to the budget and more details on the scheme itself, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Camille. Eva, on your portfolio, do you want to make any further comments at this point, or shall we deal with the recommendations?
If you'd like to deal with the recommendations, Chair, that'd be great.
Councillor Repton, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. You'll see the two recommendations down there, and this comes from what, again, local people are saying in the ward that I represent in Darley Ward in Chester Green. We've got the temporary school there, St Mary's, a few yards away from Landau 40, where there's existing gridlock and some real dangers at that junction that local people were raising with us at a roadshow we had yesterday with council officers. That's going to be added to by the increase of these numbers at Landau 40. And that's why it's important to get this travel plan, we believe, in place. And also to look in, as it's in item 2, about the carbon footprint, as most pupils attending these schools come from all over the city. The carbon footprint is pretty high as it is. And one of the things that was raised last night by members is, would it not be better to look at more localised schools to increase the places rather than have them coming to a central place and increasing that carbon footprint? So I think both recommendations make sense. The travel plan to try to reduce some of the concerns and worries and dangers that there currently are will only be added to. And secondly, to look at that footprint and the possibility of increasing places elsewhere in the city that are closer to pupils' and parents' homes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So, Councillor Williams, did you want to deal with that, or did you want Gamal to start?
Yeah, I'll deal with both of them if that's okay.
Thank you.
First of all, I'm a bit disappointed that particularly experienced members of the Scrutiny Commission don't know that a travel plan is routinely drawn up and submitted as part of any major school expansion planning application. Landau 40 College will be required to submit a new travel plan to accompany their planning application for the proposed scheme. The plan will set out the steps and measures to be introduced to mitigate any impacts arising from this priority school expansion proposal. So that's the first one. So my response there would be really to Cabinet to say no to the recommendation because it's going to have to be done anyway. In terms of Part 2, currently travel data for pupils attending Landau 40 College will be collected again as part of the new travel plan submission required as part of the planning application. The travel plan, once developed, will include updated figures and set out steps to be taken by the school to encourage and maximise sustainable travel options. Landau 40 College's central location, of course, provides an opportunity to provide necessary additional school places in an outstanding school which is easily accessible by public transport with a central bus station close by. In terms of the second point there, the citywide secondary pupil numbers and projections are set out in the Council Cabinet report covering the period up to 2027-28. This is consistent with the forecast period required by the Department of Education for the annual statutory school capacity return. Pupil projections tend to become less accurate over a longer period of time and so would not necessarily provide reliable data. In terms of school expansions, already a number of secondary school expansions have taken place across the city to accommodate increasing pupil numbers. Again, I'm disappointed that experienced members have not noted this in the previous couple of years. These include Benrose School, Derby Moor Academy, Murray Park School and West Park School. The Landau 40 College expansion proposal aims to provide further additional capacity in a central location to ensure that the council can contribute to meet its legal duty in respect of school places. I've been fully briefed on the forecast pupil numbers and data. This information has also been circulated to all schools and academy trusts in Derby to help support with their future planning. In addition, a focused discussion on strategic school place planning and admissions will be taking place at the Children and Young People Scrutiny Review Board on the 13th of December this year. So again, on that one, I would reject the recommendation.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Repton.
Yeah, experienced members have noticed the gridlock, the traffic offences, the near misses, an increasing number of the public complaining about the real problems that there actually are. And it's important that for elected members to represent those and make sure that we take on board the concerns that were raised last night. Thank you, Chair.
As has been explained, Councillor Repton, to you as an experienced member, which you should know, you'll have every opportunity to do that in the planning process and the work around this being done. Councillor Schenker, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Just want to mention a couple of things as you allowed Councillor Williams to read a pre-written speech that she's just made. Thank you very much. I've only this morning learned that despite this money going into Lande Forte and other schools, as the Cabinet members clearly outlined, St Benedict's in Derby hasn't had that level of investment, and something for the officers to take away. But it's just this morning I've learned, and it's quite concerning that pupils are on the verge of being sent home to study because of the poor state of several classrooms, including some of the temporary classrooms. So maybe somebody from the council can contact the school and offer some help and try and avoid pupils being sent home to study.
Clearly, St Benedict's is not on the agenda today, so you're not going to get a direct answer in relation to that. But I heard last week of some similar concerns, and I'm sure the officers and Yvonne are already on top of that. So
I just thought it was important enough to raise it.
that's very good of you. Thank you. Right. So we have any other further comments or questions? So we have recommendations 2.1 to 2.4. We've got some financial matters on this, I think, in Part B, yes, as well. But the recommendations are here to be agreed subject to that, yes? Thank you. That's agreed. Right, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, I need a comfort break, so I'm going to adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes, Karen, and we'll come back at 1:15, if that's all right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, again back to this Council Cabinet meeting on Wednesday the 10th of November. We've just had a short comfort break and we're moving on now to item 12, I believe, which is the Padley Centre relocation. Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. So this report, and there is a report obviously in the confidential section of the Cabinet papers later with the detailed financial implications within it, but this general report is an update on the progress of a key component of the necessary land assembly at the Beckettwell site, which to facilitate the development of the new performance venue. And as members will be clearly aware, it is a key regeneration site priority for our city. In July of last year, Cabinet approved the acquisition on for a replacement for the community hub and warehouse premises used by the Padley Group to enable them to relocate their operation from Beckett Street to an alternative suitable property within the city centre to continue to develop their work with vulnerable homeless people in our city. Extensive work over the 8 months since March of this year until March, to find a suitable premise for the Padley Group, utilising local land agents working alongside Padley Group to find something suitable, has been going on to meet their needs, which resulted in a property being identified, and Cabinet in March of this year approved a funding package to proceed with that acquisition. Since that time, additional work and context have changed that requires a revision to that original funding agreement, and that is to account for a number of issues: increases in general market conditions and inflation around the refurbishment of that property, identification of additional work needed to make the property fit for purpose, and that's with more detailed surveys being taken as work has progressed. The agreement by the Padley Group to proceed to sale of their land assets, and therefore they're able to contribute up front and would not need a loan from the council. So this report thus recommends a change to the original funding package, resulting in a net cost increase, which is relatively modest, but has been identified from within approved capital programmes, so no additional cost to the authority. And as part of this new revised grant agreement is a condition that the Padley Group work with the council to demonstrate best value all the work that is commissioned, and an overall agreement that is capped and is a maximum for the local authority. Now, full details of the financial implications are contained in a confidential item on this agenda. Overall, this land acquisition is critical to enable the delivery of the performance venue, which is an important part of our ambition for the regeneration of our city, and to ensure that the Padley Group can continue their work delivering services to homeless people in Derby. The senior officer directly involved in this work and the negotiations with the Padley Group, Ian Fulliger, is present tonight and is able to support members with any more questions on the detail. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Repton, can I say we've got the recommendations here in front of us from the Exec Scrutiny Board tonight, but I have to say to you that I am not able to allow any discussion in relation to the, and I'm not going to accept any discussion in relation to the first recommendation, and the reason for that is that there is, I understand that there is another property which may or may not have to, have to be relocated as a result of this, but it actually bears no relevance to the item on the agenda tonight, which is the Padley Centre. And for commercial reasons, both for the business and for the developer SDS who are dealing with that side of things, for commercial reasons, it wouldn't be appropriate for us to discuss that tonight in any detail. There are commercial sensitivities here for both partners, and actually in the break we've just had, I've just received some more information that shows that help and support and advice is ongoing, and there may be, there's very likely to be a solution in the offing, which I don't want to a compromise. I'll talk to you afterwards, Councillor Repton, if you wish a bit more about
It's
the details.
absolutely outrageous.
Well,
You're
I'm not-
trying to stifle debate. I mean, there are absolutely no commercial sensitivities
Repton,
whatsoever.
Councillor
What we're
Repton.
wanting the Cabinet to do is to talk to this organisation.
Councillor
It's going to be
Repton.
thrown out on the streets just before Christmas. It serves thousands of people in this city. If we're serious about becoming a city of culture, then we'll help this organisation. We'll at least talk to
Councillor
them. There's
Repton.
nothing commercial about asking you lot to talk to them about it. That's nothing whatsoever.
Councillor Repton, you're talking nonsense in terms of some of what you've said there. Emily, is there anything you wish to advise in relation to
I challenge
the
your
commercial
ruling.
sensitivity?
The issue, obviously there was some discussion at exec scrutiny last night and both...
Can't hear you, Emily, sorry.
There was some discussion at exec scrutiny last night and both myself and Rachel North advised that from our perspective, recommendations should be raised on the content of of the report and the subject matter of that report. The subject matter here is actually, although part of the wider, related to the wider Beckett Well development, is actually very specific about elements of it, and it's to that report that I advised that recommendations should be limited.
Okay, so that's the decision. I can assure you, Councillor Repton, that
So you just want to so no debate about something important to thousands of people in the city.
I'm not stifling anything. What I'm giving you is
It's becoming like North Korea in here.
Do you want to finish? Do you want to allow me to finish? Or shall I just move
I wish
on?
I could start.
The fact is, Councillor Repton, you've got my assurance that at the appropriate time, all the circumstances around this will be...
Before they're thrown out.
We will contribute at the appropriate time, yes, not before they're thrown out, before they have to leave.
Will you be meeting them over the next few days?
Okay.
Can I ask that, Chair? Will you be meeting them over the next few days to talk about their situation?
Help and support is ongoing, I've already said that, and it will be. And
so you say you're talking to them?
We are determined to help this organisation. Okay, so I'm going to move on then to Executive Scrutiny Board's recommendation number 2, which relates to the item on the agenda.
I am allowed to talk to this one, am I?
You are, because it's on the agenda. Yes.
Well, the other one's on the agenda, but you've said I can't talk to it. But okay, be that as it may, I think this needs to be taken up outside of this committee.
Can you just retract that? Because the other issue is clearly not on the agenda.
It's not clearly not on the agenda. It's your ruling it's not on the agenda. But look, be that as it may, I mean, we're just going in circles. I will talk to item 2 and 3. Item 1 I will take up outside of this committee because it's an affront to democracy. Item 2. In terms of the costs of the Padley Centre are already escalating, we've seen that. It's over £1 million that you're giving to Padley, but not to the Debrec Studios know-how whatsoever. And part of that is in terms of the potentially overpriced the property, which is in a very poor state. And to ensure that taxpayers' money is not wasted, the Executive Board resolved to recommend to you this evening that the permanent relocation should be reviewed prior to proceeding with the purchase, which is facilitated by the need to move to a temporary location. So that's the second one. In terms of the third, you'll see in terms of the concerns about wanting the Padley Group, in terms of their new permanent building, to try to move towards for it to be zero carbon ready. Thank you, Chair.
Rachel, did you want to refer to those 2 recommendations regarding the Padley Centre?
Yeah, on the second recommendation, as I said in the introduction, there has been an extensive property search over the last few months to identify suitable promises for the Padley Group. It has proved challenging. We have now identified a property, and we really need to continue our efforts to secure this, both for their future, the Padley Group's charity's future, and to hit the timescales required for the performance venue project. Pausing at this stage would be not really acceptable and would, I think, not be the best possible solution and would cause concern around the ability to deliver the performance venue on the timescale originally agreed. The price paid between Padley and the vendors has been agreed is clearly to ensure that the council's grant is spent wisely. We have valuations from commercial agents to give comfort of that, and we are confident it's not overinflated. As I said in the introduction, the costs of refurbishment have increased because of general construction market conditions and inflation, and more detailed survey work and more detailed specification of the work required to make it fit for purpose. There is nothing structural in the building that would justify renegotiating the asking price at this stage. And just to reassure members, the level of funding which approval is being sought is a maximum level of grant available. There is strong cost control mechanisms in place to ensure the council's grant only drawn down against actual spend, and there will be tender processes to ensure the work's value for money. In terms of the third recommendation, we can definitely explore this with the Padley Group, but clearly if there were additional costs to achieve zero carbon solution, this would ultimately be the Padley Group's decision whether they want to fund that.
Thank you, Rachel. So in summary, we've done due diligence in relation to the costs of purchasing the property, and there are measures in train to make sure that the improvements that will be necessary are done in an appropriate manner. And in relation to the zero carbon ready situation, we will be encouraging them to do so and to take as much account of that as possible. Ultimately, that's a decision for the Padley Centre when they get into the new property. Is that right, Rachel? Yeah. Anybody want to come in? Councillor Schenker.
Thank you, Chair. Let me start by thanking Rachel for highlighting and confirming the reason this report here is here with us in front of Cabinet today is because of the Beckett-Well proposals. This isn't a purely standalone report on the Padley Centre, as you might want to portray it, Chair. This is here because of your decision to proceed with a performance venue at the Beckett-Well Arena following the failed attempts to refurbish the assembly rooms. And that decision on a number of occasions will continue to come back and haunt this administration as it was, because it wasted several £1 million worth of taxpayers' money.
Padley Centre, Councillor Schenker.
As I said, Beckett-Well Arena. So let me carry on. We continue to support the Beckett-Well Arena proposals, and the main reason for that is because of your actions. It's the only option left in town.
Padley Centre, Councillor Schenker. I'll give you one more warning, and then I'm just going to cut you.
Well, you can stop me from Councillor Poulter if you want me to stop speaking.
I will if you don't stick to the subject.
Want me to stop challenging your administration's
if you don't stick to the subject, then I will stop you.
But I will say what I want to say, and it's up to you if you're going to allow me to do that or not. It's entirely up to you. I'm not going to shout over you.
You've had two warnings, and I'll just stop you talking.
I want to talk about the context this report.
This is a council cabinet meeting, not a Labour Party broadcasting situation.
And it's not intended that. I'm here to represent our group and make our views to the cabinet.
Carry on then.
If you're not prepared to listen to that, you just need to say, I'm not going to waste my breath on you.
Padley Centre.
Thank you.
I'm not going to waste my time on you.
So whilst we're looking at the options to assemble the land, as the Strategic Director has said, which originally relocated the United Reformed Church, this paper talks about relocation for the Padley Centre, but another important relocation which you must have regard to is the benefits Dubrek Studios has for the city and all those people who use it on a regular basis. And the Beckett-Well Arena, in my view, is obliged to rehouse that organisation as well. And I'll come back to Dubrek Studios in a second.
Councillor Schenker,
so let me start by concentrating on the Padley Centre.
We've discussed the reasons for not referring to.
And I indicated to speak then, and you wouldn't allow me.
To these other properties, this other property that's dealing. So, would you refrain from talking about the specific property?
I will refrain from talking about any commercial sensitivities around these other properties that you tell us about.
Okay.
So let me go back to the Padley Centre. In this in a similar cabinet meeting, I think it was an online one and not in this chamber, when you introduced the Beckett-Well Arena project, you reassured me, other members, your own cabinet, exec scrutiny, and the people of Derby, a full costed business case would come back in front of them for scrutiny. and you failed to deliver on that project. There's no two ways about it. It's fact.
Has this got some relevance to today's paper?
Absolutely. My concern here...
Explain the relevance.
Okay, my concern here, this increased cost to relocate the Padley Centre is the first overspend on this project. And you and your previous leader, reassured Cabinet, reassured Derby, that the risk of overspend was mitigated by doing this proposal and the forward funding agreement with SJS. And there was no risk of any overspend. The risk was all borne by St James Securities. And I'm sure you can recall that. You said that in a public meeting. So my point is, this risk now, or it's not a risk, it's actually happening. This overspend now is purely related to that original decision. It's taxpayers' money. We're relocating the Padley Centre, who do a fantastic job in the city, and it's right they should be relocated. But we've found them a venue which we're paying a significant amount of money for. We've agreed a sale price. We've gone in and done some surveys, as the strategic director has told us, although at 4.3 in the report, it does say there are structural issues with the building, and I think Rachel may have just overlooked that in her previous statement. There are structural issues with the building, there's electrical issues with the building, and there's other significant issues which need to be adapted in that building to make it, as Rachel said and as the report says, fit for purpose. So what that tells me, and any other reasonable-minded person, is currently the proposal to relocate Padley to that building is that it isn't fit for purpose. And if during any usual purchase of a building you identified during the surveying part there was issues with the building, any one of us who was spending our money, I think it'd be reasonable to assume, would go back to the owners of the original building and say, our costs are escalating, we expect the price to come down. And again, I'll cover this in the confidential item of the report. The price we're actually paying for the building has gone up. The costs to make it suitable for Padley have gone up. We've had to find an interim solution because the legalities and stuff has delayed all of this move, and I'm fully aware of the need to honour our agreements with SJS to vacate that site. So there are costs with a temporary move. That temporary move now allows us to just reflect to make sure the purchase of the new home is the right decision and value for money for the taxpayer. So I think the recommendation is quite sensible. All it's doing is asking for some reflection on the decision to purchase the proposed building and all the associated costs to go with that, whilst Padley have moved and relocated to temporary accommodation, which is going to have to happen anyway because of the legalities around this move. So I think the exec scrutiny recommendation is absolutely valid. And there's one other point I'll make, and I'm going to have to mention Debrec here, because Debrec have been told, but it's relevant to the Padley Centre report.
I'm not going to discuss it, Councillor.
It's relevant to the Padley Centre report.
Carry on, I'll stop you.
You say that there's potentially ARG funding available for the Padley Centre.
Councillor Shank, I'm going to end it there because
ARG funding
this
for
is
Padley
not
Centre.
relevant to Padley Centre.
It is, because the report says there's ARG funding. The report says...
Your contribution's completed.
The report says there's ARG funding which could mitigate the cost for the Padley Centre.
Anybody else got any comments?
Can I just ask for the monitoring officer to rule if that's out of order? Talking about ARG funding for the Padley Centre.
I'm chairing this meeting, it's a cabinet meeting. Your contribution's
So
finished.
I'm going to just finish on this point then.
No, you're not. Anybody else
want
to comment?
The report is saying there's ARG funding available for the Padley Centre. When Debrec have been told the ARG funding has been fully utilised.
Can we get on with the business, please?
Sorry?
We're trying to get on with the business.
Absolutely. And this is part of the business.
Anybody else want to contribute? Okay. In that case, we've got recommendations 2.1 to... Sorry, Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to this move, and it is a sensitive move, we've had a lot of discussion with Padley over joining our homelessness strategy within the city. We have worked with them to vacate their current premises. We have worked with them to transform their way of working with our homelessness population, and they have joined the city with regard to the homelessness strategy. That strategy over the last 3 years has reduced the number of on-street homeless from 34 down to the last count, which was 6. That strategy is working. Padley are on board with that. We are moving them to new accommodation. That accommodation will not be a drop-in centre as they currently have. It will provide them with the warehousing that they need to carry out their work. It will provide them with the educational facilities to be able to get some of our most vulnerable clients, our homeless clients, into accommodation. So it will be an accommodation-based strategy. The valuation on the premises was carried out by 2 independent people. We had a higher and lower valuation. The vendor accepted our lower bid, which was the lower valuation on the premises. We have looked at those premises, we've done assessments, and to meet the training needs that are required with the new, improved, if you like, Padley offer, and that has associated costs with it. That cost envelope is ours to manage, but Padley's to work within. We can ask them to decarbonise the premises, we could ask to make zero carbon, but as Rachel has pointed out, that we can only request that. If there is any escalation in costs, then it will be Padley that will be bearing those costs. So we can be clear on what we're agreeing tonight in the recommendations. I think Padley have made a really good move here, and it joins up the strategy on homelessness that this city is currently benefiting from.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Webb. So couple that advantageous position around a very important service that they do for the city with the fact that we've got reassurances in terms of value for money, and there will be measures in train to monitor the costs of the refurbishments, then we're doing what we need to do in respect of this move. And as has already been said, the deal isn't done yet, so there will be temporary accommodation, but the bottom line is here that this is what we can do for the Padley Centre to improve their position, improve the service for the city. So any other comments from Cabinet? Or anybody else? In that case, we have recommendations 2.1 to 2.6. Can they be agreed? Thank you. Agreed. Okay, moving on. Financial monitoring, quarter 2. Alison? Where is she? There she is. Thank you. Well, can I just say, if anybody from this other property that is here that wants to speak to me and Ross about it in a little bit more detail after the meeting, then perfectly happy to do so. If you want to wait to have that conversation, and I can let you know something of the information I have received today. So thank you. Sorry, Alison.
Okay.
I just needed to say that before you
Thank you, Chair. So this is the quarter 2 financial monitoring report. So this is the financial position of the council to the period to the end of September, and it's forecasted to the end of the financial year. In terms of the revenue budget, 1.3 of the report gives a directorate summary of the financial forecast. And you can see there in that table that the gross pressures forecast for the end of this quarter are 8.1 million after applying budgets that were put aside this year in particular for our COVID scoring. And that was predominantly income shortfalls in the leisure and parking services as we regained post-pandemic activity. Netting this gross position off by the COVID reserve that we put aside at the beginning of the financial year, plus some other small year adjustments, our net overspending position is £5.4 million, which is a positive movement from the circa 6.4 million that was reported at quarter one. I would like to say is that moving into the second quarter of the financial year, we were quick to react to the emerging pressures and quickly set up processes to ensure that only essential critical expenditure was being incurred. And this has contributed to the more favourable position that we're reporting at this quarter. These measures will continue for the remainder of the financial year. The cause of our overspends at quarter two are reflective of those that we reported at quarter one. Pay pressures of 2.1 million, particularly in relation to unsettled pay award that is causing pressures this financial year, and the use of agencies in some of our frontline services in relation to our street pride and social care services. And the single biggest driver for demand is demand for our services, and that's particularly in relation to contacts into children's social care, and they continue to rise and have been a well-rehearsed issue for the council over the first half of this financial year. We are seeing an increase in those contacts of up to 26% on previous year's activity. And whilst our looked after children population is holding, the insufficient number of places nationally to place children is causing a huge spike in our costs. I'd like to say, however, on a positive side, in terms of the city centre recovery and the leisure recovery, we're currently forecasting a shortfall of income of around 8% of our normal income generated in that area, and we hope that will hope to improve for the remainder of the financial year. I suppose what we do know, though, is that the latter two quarters of the financial year will continue to be a challenge, especially as we move into the winter months and the impact this has on our care services. In terms of the delivery of planned savings, the report details that we are delivering 87% of our planned £9.6 million savings, which is £8.3 million. And Appendix 1 of the report provides the details of the revenue forecast variances in detail. In terms of our capital position, the total slippage of our capital programme is 93 million against an approved programme of 274 million, of which we'd already reported 72 million at quarter one, so there's a movement of 17 million identified in the recommendations of this report. The detailed variances on those movements are articulated in Appendix 4 of the report. In terms of the dedicated school grant, that continues to show significant pressures on the high needs block, and that block supports children with additional needs across the city. There's a very high risk, though, that the DSG reserve will be depleted by the end of the financial year, and that is a national issue, and Derby has been quite successful in terms of holding those DSG reserves to this financial year. The collection fund, which is the council tax and non-domestic rates activity, continues to be a challenge, and recovery activities have now commenced and returned to business as usual and pre-pandemic levels. I think that provides a summary of the quarter two position. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison, for that, and thank you to your staff and Simon, and for all that, who I understand is not well at the moment, for all your efforts on this and for getting to the position we are now. And we'll continue to work with you on this financial pressures, and we've got a meeting tomorrow to continue the work that we're doing on this on a detailed basis. So on behalf of the Cabinet, thank you for you and your team for the way we're trying to address these things. Questions? Comments? Just for clarity, the Exec Scrutiny Board looked at this and resolved to note the report. Any other comments, questions tonight? Councillor Schenker.
Thank you again, Chair. So, the September Q1 outturn report had a headline overspend figure, I think was £11.6 million, and with the various mitigations, that figure was declared at still being £6.41 million, if I'm right, Alison, to find for this year. And now we're told the headline figure in this report is 8.113 million, because we've changed the way, I think it's the COVID reserve has been used. I think we've applied it before, we've applied it to the budget rather than as a mitigation factor. So could just do with an explanation around that. And it's good that officers are doing, you know, a sterling job in trying to bridge the gap in this year's finances and get to a balanced base. But it's obvious to me it wasn't a remarkable budget. I think again.
So shall we get you an answer to your question then, Councillor Schenker?
If I can come back in after the answer,
that's
fine. Yeah.
Want to answer the question?
Yes, I could provide clarity on that. So, in terms of the way that we had two sort of responses to the COVID pressures this financial year, is when we set the budget, we put a budget aside, which was the COVID placeholder budget, which you'll see that is been moved to the top part of the table because that's where all the budget figures are. The COVID reserve is held below the line because that's a reserve allocation. So yes, you are right, there's a switch, but they're two distinct different parts, in that one was budgeted for and one was a reserve on the balance sheet.
Any other questions?
Yep, sure. Next one might even be for yourself.
How many questions have you got, Councillor Schenker?
Only a couple, don't worry.
Okay. That's good.
So the other point I'll mention is from the last Cabinet meeting. So when I, based on briefings I had, suggested to balance next year's budget, there would be significant job losses at the council. Again, similar to today, I was being shut down and spoken over by your deputy leader, sorry, former deputy leader at that time. You wasn't in attendance. But subsequently from that, I was accused of scaremongering. I was accused of having a vivid imagination.
Absolutely right, yes, you were.
Absolutely, your words and your new deputy leader's words, I think they were this time. But obviously I was right. Again, I was right. There's job...
What was your guess at the numbers, Councillor Schenker? What was your guess?
I didn't guess at any number. You should know me better than that, Councillor Poulter.
What was your guess?
I don't know why you find job losses.
What was the numbers that you decided it was appropriate to put out there?
I was told the budget gap was anywhere between 20 and 29.
What were the numbers
you
chose to put out?
The job losses, I was told, were between 3 and 500. If you've got more accurate figures on there, on such a serious matter that you managed to sit there with a right grin on your face.
On numbers, Councillor Schenker, what we do know is that the staff of the council have been invited to enter into a voluntary redundancy process.
So there are redundancies.
Nobody knows what numbers that might entail, because that's entirely in the gift of the employees of this council. So to guess and speculate and put things out there in relation to job losses is nothing but more than reckless and disturbing to the employees of the council. Let's go through the process, go through the budget, and then you'll get the budget proposals later on in the year, in which there'll be consultation about. Okay. Any other questions?
You may think it's reckless.
Any other questions, Councillor
I've got
Schenker?
a number of other questions. The capital spend still remains of a major concern. Major projects that this city need aren't being delivered on time. More work has been done. Can I finish, please, Councillor Paul?
You've raised the capital programme. I'm going to get you an answer in what's happening in relation to the
Can I finish what I've got to say, and then we can get them answered together? Again, if you don't like being questioned...
I'm perfectly happy to be questioned, so long as you...
You just need to say.
Do you not want to hear the answer?
I absolutely want. That's why I'm asking the question.
Let's have the answer then. Alison, did you want to reflect on where we're at with the capital programme?
Yes, there is slippage on the capital programme. That's in terms of profiling of some of the earlier expectations of delivery of those schemes, which weren't deliverable in terms of some of the initial expectations, as I said. Appendix 4 does detail the reasons behind that, and you can see there's a whole multitude of reasons, planning, consent, lots of things. It's not just all around deliverability and capacity, but Appendix 4 does give you the full detail of the reasons behind every single variance of that. So I would reference you to Appendix 4.
The answers are in the report, in fact, aren't they? Okay. Councillor Shanker, bear in mind you've already had 2 more questions than anybody else would have been allowed under your previous administration. So, have you got one more question you want to ask?
I didn't know there was any. I didn't know there was any limit in the number.
The limit is the choice of the chair, and bearing in mind the time constraints on the meeting as a whole. So,
well, if you want to bring all these reports in one meeting and not throughout the year, that's your
any
choice.
more questions?
I have, and I'll ask you this question.
Oh, go on,
now that
last one.
We've had your third choice cabinet member for finance.
End of your contribution.
You've had your third choice member for finance. Will you agree to a previous scrutiny recommendation to establish a cross-party working group to help resolve the budget problems that this council faces?
2.1 to 2.2.
Shocking. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Are you going to answer that question, Chris?
Can they be agreed, Cabinet? 2.1 to 2.2.
Are you going to answer the question, Chris?
Okay. Moving on. Budget monitoring, not budget. Compliance. Item 14, compliance with contract and financial procedure rules. Is that you again, Alison? Thank you.
It is, thank you, Chair. So, compliance with contract and financial procedure rules. The first item on the report is in relation to the Opportunity Areas Programme. The Opportunity Areas Programme is funded by the Department for Education since 2016 and is focused on Derby's most deprived areas. The DfE have offered and expanded the programme for a further 12 months with a new focus of making up on lost learning time due to the pandemic. The DfE will ask Derby City Council to receive a grant of up to 1.369 million for the Derby area during 2021-2 for the financial years, and to award this in line with the recommendations of the local area opportunity board and the DfE. It's recommended to approve the acceptance of the opportunity area grant for Derby and the additional grant of 1.369 million. Secondly, in the report, this refers to a bid in relation to the Ageing Well bid of £780,000. The Council has bid for and secured £780,000 from the Ageing Well Programme Board, which is hosted by Derbyshire and Derby Clinical Commissioning Group, for an Ageing Well programme funded to provide adult social care element of the NHS urgent community response in Derby. It's recommended in the report to accept the funding and note the bid of £780,000 from the CCG, and also to accept and allocate the Ageing Well programme funding as part of the NHS Forward Plan for 22-25 for the purpose of delivering adult social care element of the NHS's urgent community response. Thirdly, in the report is in relation to the declaration of a surplus asset at 1 Abbey Yard. 1 Abbey Yard is a small residential property which previously formed part of the council's portfolio, a service for secure tenancies, but it's recently become vacant following the death of the tenant. It's recommended to approve 1 Abbey Yard, Darley Abbey, for the surplus to the council's requirements. Fourthly, in the report is in relation to the Household Support Fund. The Council has been awarded a Household Support Fund of £2.224 million, which has been available to all county councils and unitary authorities nationally, and that's to support those most in need this winter with food and energy bills. Paragraph 4.26 of the report details the proposals for the use of the grant, and they can be summarised as £750,000 to allocate vouchers to all schools in Derby for free school meals for the term breaks between October 21 and March 22, £1.4 million of funding to provide a financial contribution to the cost of energy, water and other related essentials in the form of a one-off voucher for vulnerable households, and £70,000 of funding will be granted to support local schemes that already help vulnerable households, and the money will be granted to increase the reach of that support and will be managed and allocated by Community Action Derby. It's recommended in the report to approve the acceptance of the funding of £2.224 million for the household support grant. Next in the report is in relation to the Ravensdale decant costs. Following the fire at Ravensdale Infant and Nursery School in October 2020, revenue costs have been incurred during the temporary decanting period while the replacement school building works are underway. These indicative decanting costs are currently estimated at £273,000, and it's recommended in the report to approve the use of the Ravensdale Insurance Reserve to fund those indicative revenue decanting costs. Next in the report is in relation to the Holiday Activities and Food Programme, which is an extension of the Summer Scheme HAF programme. The HAF programme aims to provide healthy food and enriching activities for children who are in receipt of free school meals. The funding for the DFE is to coordinate this free holiday provision. In July of this year, we received an updated grant determination letter provided by the DFE, which had allocated an extra £126,000 of contingency funding to help deliver the winter HAF provision. The recommendations in the report are to note the acceptance of the DFE contingency grant of £126,000 for the HAF winter programme. And it's recommended to agree that CAD will continue to administer, fund and liaise with delivery partners to ensure that the holiday activities and food support for children will continue. Lastly in the report is a plan for the dedicated schools grant transformation programme. That transformation programme was approved to commence at Council Cabinet's meeting on the 12th of February 2020. What we do know there is the delivery of the SEND reforms has proved a significant challenge, with many councils experiencing significant DSG deficits, and the national demands for assessment in the education and healthcare plans have increased by more than 70% in the last 12 months. Despite this financial position, Derby is more favourable in the DSG reserves at the end of 2021. At the meeting at Schools Forum on the 12th of October this year, there was unanimous agreement that this transformation work should continue to be done and be funded from DSG reserves. It's recommended to approve the use of the DSG reserves up to a maximum of £930,000 to complete the High Needs Transformation Programme, and it's recommended to approve the award of a contract to Empower for £643,000 to deliver and support that High Needs Transformation Programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison, for that. Fly through that. There's some really great grants in here and useful funding been achieved, and again thank you to the officers in your office, but also those officers around the council who have to put the work in to get these grants organised and the spending on those as well. So for the record, Exec Scrutiny looked at this last night and resolved to note the report. Cabinet, we've had a detailed briefing on this. Is there any issues that we as Cabinet wish to comment further? I'll come to Councillor Shanker in a minute. Any comments from Cabinet on particular items? No. In that case, Councillor Shanker.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering whether either yourself or one of your esteemed Cabinet colleagues could give me an explanation on 1 Abbey Yard. The report at 1.1, before you make the decision, asks if Cabinet would declare it as surplus to the Council's requirements. Yeah, if you do a search on Boxall, Brown and Jones for number 1 Abbey Yard, it says the status of the property is sold subject to contract already. So has that decision been taken outside of here? Or it's a retrospective decision? It just doesn't seem, again, to me, the right way to be doing things.
I'll take advice, but it's not sold, is it? It's sold subject to contract, so I assume.
But yet you're trying to, you've not even declared it as surplus to
so
council requirements yet.
Subject to this Cabinet's decision. But Rachel, any comment on that?
But you've not even said it's
an issue that you particularly know about. Paul, any thoughts on that?
How about one of your Cabinet members?
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Let's go.
I can actually tell you what happened with 1 Abbey Yard.
Good.
Quite some weeks ago now, I was approached by somebody who, a friend of theirs, had put in an offer and talked to the agents, and was very surprised to be told, oh no, we're only accepting cash offers, not people who would have to have a mortgage. So this seemed very strange to them. They mentioned it to their friend, and this friend then mentioned it to me. I also thought that sounds very strange, and certainly isn't in keeping with the council getting potentially the best price for this asset. So I had a word with someone in the council's internal audit, and I presume, obviously, because the property was initially valued just slightly under the delegated limit, that really that should have flagged up first of all that this process that we're now doing now needed to be done. And obviously I'm glad now that the process is properly being followed. But I would like to have assurances that, because obviously at 4.24, it's recommended to approve that the delegated authority be given to the Strategic Director of Corporate Resources in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Finance, Assets and Digital to agree the terms of the disposal of the property. I would expect that whoever we get, via whichever agent we're going to use, that they don't tell people on the phone, oh, we're only going to accept cash offers, because that certainly isn't in the interests of this council in getting the best deal. So when you do to agree the terms of the disposal, just please do make it absolutely clear that it doesn't matter whether someone's got cash at the ready to give, or whether, and it shouldn't be, it absolutely should not be. If that's not the best deal that the council is going to be able to get, this needs to be looked at further. Thank you.
So are you satisfied, though, now that the process is being done properly, you say?
No.
Well, not unless,
Well,
it's about the agreeing the terms for the disposal of the property. If it's now saying it's being sold subject to contract, I'd be very interested to know whether that is just a cash bid, or whether there were other people willing to put in offers that were higher, even though they had to get themselves a mortgage.
Okay,
Because I'm concerned that the council gets the best deal it can and the most money for this property that it can.
Okay. Ian,
considering our financial situation. Thank you.
Ian, was there anything in that comment that you can advise us on in relation to normal practice, in relation to terms of sale and things like that, or is it something we, as promised by the Chief Exec, will get some advice on and deal with?
I think I'd like to deal with it outside the meeting, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we'll deal with that then. So, how crucial is this recommendation, this particular recommendation? Can that be wait till next month, or we'll look at it and, if necessary, do a? Sorry, I'm just trying to talk to the officers. I think we'll probably leave that recommendation off, look at the circumstances, and hold an urgent leaders meeting, advising everybody that it's going to be heard as and when we've got more information. Okay?
Suitable.
Okay.
Yeah, if it helps, I'd suggest you declare it surplus to the council's requirements and offer it out for sale, and maybe complete the sale afterwards, rather than have to come back to declare it as being surplus, because then you'll still be doing it the wrong way around.
Seems to make sense. Okay, we'll do that, and we'll notify you of any urgent leaders item to finalise it, yeah? Okay, so with that, you want to come in, Paul? No? Okay. And with that slight variation, Jonathan, you want to come in?
Yeah, I know Yvonne's not here, and obviously she's gone home, obviously not feeling very well, but I think it would be worth pointing out that the Household Support Fund, which is obviously a significant amount of income that we've received, is 2.224 million. And Yvonne and myself are working quite closely together with Brendan Fenton's team, to obviously deliver that strategy over the coming winter months. And also, obviously, the HAF programme, which has been incredibly successful over the summer months. It's great to see that that will be continuing its role over the Christmas period, I think, for 4 days, whilst working quite closely with Community Action Derby. So I think that those two in particular schemes are very much worth noting, and agree with the recommendation against 1 Abbey Yard. Let's take that recommendation from Councillor Shanker. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to try and find time to add up what the total value of these things, but it's a considerable amount of money that the officers and themselves have been able to achieve from government, from other sources, and it should prove very useful to the council. So with that in mind, can we agree the recommendations as printed with the exception of the one on Abbey Yard? Yes?
Chair.
Okay. Agreed.
Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just say the one on Abbey Yard is as printed, because all it's saying is that it's surplus to council requirements, and so it is as printed.
Right, but you're right, but we do agree to the principle that it's surplus to requirements. The other aspect we'll look at separately and come back to you. Okay. Good. Okay, moving on then. Where are we at? So it's item 15, performance monitoring, quarter 2.
Thank you, Chair.
Heather.
Hi.
Hiding over there in the corner.
This report covers the period from July to September 2021 and provides an update on progress against commitments made in the Derby Recovery Plan, which includes priority performance measures, actions, projects and strategic risks, and sits alongside the Quarter 2 financial monitoring report. Headlines include 78% of measures had met or exceeded their target, were set at the end of September. 94% of measures are actually forecast to achieve their annual target by the end of the year. 91% of priority milestones or actions were assessed as on track or completed, which represents an improved position from quarter 1. The same applies with our priority projects, with 75% of priority projects showing as green or amber green at the end of September. There are 18 strategic risks currently within the strategic risk register. Since June, we've had 1 risk which has been escalated to the register, which is around diminished outcomes for Derby's children and young people. And we've had 1 risk which has been de-escalated, which is around rough sleeping and homelessness. A full overview of performance is presented within Appendix 1. Achievements are shown at paragraph 411. And include, for example, over £111 million of funding has been generated through private sector investment in the city. We have supported 49 businesses and created 124 jobs in the same period. Activities to support energy efficiency have also increased, with 20 grants awarded totalling over £130,000. Over 250,000 people have attended Derby Live events in the city, which obviously includes the very successful Alistar Park concert. In terms of our people services, we can see that the percentage of education, health and care plans for those with special education needs and disabilities has improved in terms of timescales. So that's actually risen from 42% to 57%, which is positive. And also we can demonstrate over 1,000 successful interventions with our customers by the welfare reform team. So there are, the report obviously does include a number of areas of risk, not least relating to the complexity of need that we are seeing with some of our customers and residents, and demand that is bringing for our services. So in particular, we've highlighted violent incidents without injury in the city centre, and also homelessness due to domestic abuse. The budget remains an area of concern, and obviously we have highlighted that in relation to the pressures that we have also referred to in the financial monitoring report. It's worth noting that there's been 3 risk reviews during the last quarter to help us look at areas where we can mitigate via actions. So they include contract management, project management, and also demands with respect to children's services. Alongside noting the Q2 performance results, there are a number of key areas that Cabinet are asked to approve this quarter. So that includes a minor amendment requested to the recovery plan, which is shown in paragraph 4.4, and also targets for performance measures have been set where appropriate, and that's shown in Appendix 2. It is also worth noting that we're not recommending any performance surgeries this quarter. That's all. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Heather. Again, thanks to the officers, both in monitoring, but also the many remarkable achievements that we've had in it at a time when it's been extremely difficult for both officers and members and for the city as a whole. So I'm quite heartened by this. Yes, there are still issues to address, and we'll continue to do that. Yes, Councillor Barker.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I just thank the officers for the layout of this report. It's considerably different to what it used to be, and I find it, well, I suppose I'm going to get some comments from elsewhere, but I find it particularly easy to read myself, and so therefore it's a great effort on part of somebody. Somebody's pretty good on computer work as well, so can I just thank them, as I say, for making it plain and simple for somebody like me to be able to understand. Councillor Shanker. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Repton, for the record, Exec Scrutiny looked at this last night and resolved to note the report. Is there somebody else? Councillor Webb?
Yeah, just to an update on the report. I think you'll find that on 411, which is key areas of achievement, along with the grants that we've managed to attract from government, there's apparently some work started on the development of the Osmaston Park BMX track. That work is completed, and a fortnight ago, Councillor Shanker, Councillor Peatfield and myself did attempt to try some bikes on the BMX track. Really good.
And Councillor Smale, did you want to comment?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Yes, a really good report in certain aspects in its layout, and obviously sometimes this report can be overlooked quite often, as it's always on the book end of agendas, but there's just one particular point that I just want to highlight out, and something that holds quite close to me, being for my declaration of interest here, being a trustee and treasurer of Disability Direct, that we've still had 33 reports of hate crimes this year, and that's just in the first 2 quarters of racist and disabilist were the most common cause of hate motivations. And I still think that as a corporate body, as members across all of the council, that we need to agree to still keep working together with our community safety team to support those that are the victim of hate crimes. Thank you, Chair.
I think we're getting the cooperation of the police in that regard, more now than we were before, so that's
it's just been recently, we're working together with antisocial behaviour with the police, but I think hate crimes is something that should not be tolerated in 2021.
Okay, thank you. Agreed. Any comments, questions? No? Okay, in that case, we'll move on. And the next thing for me to do is to say that to ask if we can resolve that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, that the press and public be excluded from the meeting during the discussion of the following items on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3 and 5 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Is that agreed?
Yeah, can I just make a comment on that before you take a vote?
You could make a comment, yes.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, in your view, given the detail you kindly shared in your press release on this item, would you have not thought it would have been appropriate to have a brief paper just to outline even some of the points covered in your press release to formally sort of acknowledge the non-commercial elements of this report in a formal report to Cabinet, rather than the whole report being in the private agenda?
Yes, it was considered, and it was considered that this is the appropriate way to do it. So, we agreed on that resolution? Thank you. In that case, we can stop the meeting.